Hey, and welcome to the Tesla Owners Club Ontario podcast. My name's Josh, and I've got someone super special here for the inaugural episode of our podcast. Tell me who you are.
John Dixon.
And John is actually are you the CEO of the Tesla Owners Club of Ontario? Or are you the Trump?
We're not for profit, so yes, I'm the founder and the president of the Tesla Owners Club of Ontario.
And so here's how this whole thing started, which is kind of awesome. It's kind of cool, and it's like I'm a podcaster, as a hobbyist. I love doing it, and I have another podcast. I decided one day, John had emailed the whole club because I'm part of the club, partly because here's why I joined the club, and you don't know this. I joined the club because we get Chatamo adapters when we go on long road trips, and I think you get them for free if you're part of the club, right?
Absolutely.
2 weeks or something like that.
Yep.
I was like, that's cool. Pay $50 a year. You get a charger that probably costs you $100 to rent for whatever reason, or $600 to buy. So that was my draw. But then I was like, I started looking at the content and seeing what they're all about and the sponsorships and everything you guys have, and you were legit. So tell me a little bit about the Tesla Owners Club before we get into why we're here and what we're doing.
Sure, Josh. Well, first of all, quick about myself. I've been driving Teslas since December 2012, so over 7 years now. And I've had every model of Tesla, sometimes 2 Teslas at a time, which is a bit ridiculous.
I'm sure your wife loves that.
Yeah. And I'm waiting. I just sold my Model X. I'm renting a 3 temporarily while I wait for my new Model X. But I started this club unofficially, if you will, because there was no owners program back in about February or March of 2013. And there's a TeslaMotorsClub.com, which is a forum that a lot of people were going on back in the early days, and it's very popular. And I found other Canadians on there, and we talked back and forth. And I said, hey, do you guys want to get together and have a bit of a discussion about our cars and learn more about our cars and the community? And that's what happened. And our first meeting, I think, was in March of 13. There was maybe a dozen or 15 guys there. I think only 3 or 4 of us had our cars. The rest were waiting for their new Model S. And that's how it went. And then I reached out to Tesla early to mid 14 and just asked if they were considering having an owners club program. And I guess they were. And they put me in touch with somebody that they were in the very early stages of looking at an owners club program. And they actually gave me an early look at what that program would look like and asked for some input, which was great. I just looked this up today, found some old emails, and we became an official club with Tesla worldwide in December of 2015. We were probably the first.
So you were officially allowed to be a Tesla, like you are. Like, how do you
can see behind me
Elon? How does it work?
Well, I don't know if we're blessed by Elon. I'm sure he's aware of us now, but we just grown since then. I won't bore with all the stories now. We'll maybe get into more down the road, but I'll just give you an idea. We now have in the neighborhood of 595 dues paying members. We have about 12 or 14 sponsors, as you mentioned, on board that we'd like to think give some value to our members, and lots of social functions and regular meetings. And we're going to talk more about that as we go on here.
Part of this podcast, and just so you're not confused, this isn't an official Tesla podcast.
Yeah, what we're trying to do is basically trying to enhance what's offered to the Tesla community.
So John has been driving one. Basically, he was one of the first adopters, right? You're one of the first.
Yeah, definitely the first. One of the first Model S owners. There's a few pioneers before me in Canada, and of course across the world, that had Roadsters. Mm-hmm. So we have some members in our club that had the Roadsters back in the day, 08, 09, 2010, and. So hopefully I can bring a different perspective, and we have some interesting connections, and both in the Tesla world and outside the Tesla world that we think can bring some interesting content to this podcast.
Well, and that's good, because how do we separate ourselves from the 1.5 million other podcasts out there that are about Tesla? I think in the last week, I've seen 2 podcasts and another club start. This is happening. Yep. People are interested in its content that I'm looking at, that I'm listening to in the podcast. There's a lot of great ones out there. So what are we going to do differently? What are we going to try to achieve on this podcast and the YouTube channel that we're trying to start?
Well, here's my thoughts. And obviously I had a little bit of trepidation about doing this because I'm a bit more visible in the public eye in the Tesla world. There's lots of good podcasts out there. You have Tesla Owners Online. You have Ryan McCaffrey with Ride the Lightning. You've got some new ones, as you talked about, and they're all great in their own way, shape, or form. But what we want to do is not just spend hours talking about all the other information that everyone's talking about. Yes, we'll touch on the Model Ys coming out. Yes, we'll touch on the price of the stock and SpaceX because it's sort of Tesla related, their latest mission and things like that. But we're not going to spend tons of time because, frankly, if you're listening to or watching a podcast like this, you already know most of this stuff. It's all over Facebook. It's all over the internet. It's everywhere. So we hopefully are going to have interviews with other Tesla owners. a lot of people maybe from the club that have a different perspective of things.
Yep.
Somebody brand new, what did they go through their thought process to buy a Tesla? Yep. Somebody like myself that's on their 7th or 8th Tesla, and why?
Yep.
Maybe, as I said, I can't promise this, but we have an opportunity perhaps to have some people from Tesla themselves come to our meetings, and who knows, maybe we could have them as a part of this podcast. So that's my thought, and I think that you and I agreed on that. And lots of other perspectives. I've actually got some notes somewhere here, but we'll certainly look at that. And I know you wanted me to talk about leasing and a whole bunch of other cool things that we think are different that maybe not other people are hearing about.
Speaking of different, I think that's how we're going to do this differently. So our podcast isn't going to be, for those who don't like listening to 90-minute podcasts, it's not going to be that. We're going to try to get to the point and stay interesting and give you the just squeeze that content out of everything we're talking about. And we're going to partition it into different parts of the episode. So this part, we're going to talk about this, and it's going to be like 10 minutes. Or this part, we're going to talk about this. Or some weeks we might have not lots to talk, but we want to just give you a quick update on what's going on. There's no rules. I'm not going to say we're doing this weekly. I'm not going to say.
And to be transparent, we're not going to be posting our referral codes, and we're not going to be endorsing products. It's all for Tesla owners and enthusiasts to learn more about the product. We might be doing the odd feature on a sponsor of the club, not necessarily to feature them, although it'll be indirect about their product, but about what they do.
Yeah.
So we have sponsors that do PPF and Tint. We have a couple of financial sponsors, believe it or not, that involve investing. We have a couple of official body shops, etc. And I also think, I can't promise any of this, but certainly in the back of my mind, that we can bring some of the other Tesla clubs all across the world. So I think it'd be great to have a 5 or 10 minute conversation with the people in Alberta and in BC and in Saskatchewan. Now we've got the
Newfoundland.
Exactly.
What happens when you get 10 feet of snow?
Exactly. But we now have the supercharger network right across Canada, and they can give us perspective on that. And why not talk to the clubs in Norway and the UK and Australia and New Zealand? And we know all these people, but they can give us a different perspective of what's going on there, which I personally think, and we'll soon find out, but if members and owners and prospective owners will find that interesting.
Yeah.
And I just want to add that we also know that in the early days, it's going to be mostly current Tesla owners are going to watch us and hear us.
Yeah.
But we want this to be appeal to everybody. Prospective Tesla owner, somebody that hasn't really thought too much about it or is now starting to do their research, a new Tesla owner, an experienced Tesla owner. It needs to be for everybody.
Let's bring on somebody who thinks EV vehicles are the dumbest thing on earth.
Yeah.
Why not debate and have great conversations with people? Maybe we'll open up minds.
Yeah.
I think another end goal would be to, promote Teslas. Every time someone at my work sees me pull up my Tesla, I'm the only one, I work with a Tesla, by the way. As soon as someone sees me pull up, it's like questions like, whoa, yeah. And I'm like, let's take you I will take anybody for a drive and let them drive my car because I am a believer in this tech. I'm a believer in, I think we differ in why we bought the car, and we'll get into that in a minute, but I love this car. Like I have to drive an hour and 10 minutes in the morning to get to work and an hour and 10 minutes to get home. And I don't even dread it. It's like my favorite time of the day.
Yeah.
So if you look at the overall, I know there's no metrics for this, but if you took 100 Tesla owners and 100, let's say, mid-level, high-range car owners, I guarantee it's going to be Tesla owners are going to be like, I'm never going to go back.
Yeah, Josh, did you see that article back in the fall where I think it was Bloomberg did a survey of like 5,000 Model 3 owners, and 99.6% said they would definitely buy another Tesla.
Yeah, that's unheard of in the auto industry.
Absolutely.
You're 7 Teslas in.
I would never buy another vehicle other than a Tesla, certainly not any other vehicle than an electric vehicle.
Yeah.
We might talk about Rivian. We might
are
talk
pro
about
EV all the way, no matter what. But Tesla is our passion.
And frankly, I'm going to throw this out there. Maybe we'll talk about climate change. Maybe we're going to talk about carbon footprint. I don't know, because I'm becoming more educated about some of these things just with my connection with the Tesla Owners Club.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, part of this big push, especially in California, is you got a lot of yogurt and granola. How to say this? You got a lot of people who are interested in the environment.
Not just in California,
I know,
my friend.
but it's if you think
we're going to convert you, Josh.
Yeah,
don't you worry about it.
So, as an inaugural episode, one of the things that, like I just told you, when I pull up at work and somebody looks at my car, and it's great because people are like, they're interested. They come over, they look at it, and I'm happy to talk for hours. I could talk for hours about this car because I'm the type of person that before I buy some kind of big tech piece of equipment, and I'm very techy. I have cameras galore. I have microphones. I do production for a living, right? I do tons of research before I do anything. And the Tesla I've been researching for years, and it was a pipe dream for me for the longest time. But I always had those questions. And if you go into the Facebook clubs, They're all over. There's so many Facebook clubs, social media, and like forums, and they're all asking
we have
the same
one of
question.
them. We have a group that's sort of part of our club, but yeah.
So John, tell me from your perspective, you've been in this game a lot longer than I have. What are some of the main questions that we've had?
I think the thing is that there's different questions. You get questions from people that know nothing about Tesla.
Yeah.
You get asked questions about people that know a little bit about Tesla, and you get asked or have statements made to you by people that are skeptical about Tesla or electric cars. So, the most common ones are, how far can you go on a charge?
Yeah.
How much does it cost to charge your car? What happens if you need a charge and there's no charger around? It's 100% electric? Really? Isn't it hybrid too? I mean, those questions aren't as common as they used to be. I mean, can you imagine back in the day driving this time of year in 2012, 2013 in a Tesla?
Yeah.
Nobody had heard of it. They thought it was some concept car or show car.
I remember seeing a CBC episode where they brought it to a mechanic and he's like, can you check the oil? And he opens it and he sees the front and he's like, I have no idea. What is this?
Yeah. So it's not as much as it used to be, but so let's quickly talk about that. How far can you drive? Well, it depends on which Tesla you get, but it's anywhere between, officially on a Model 3 short range plus, 380, I think it is.
Actually, I think it's called the standard range plus.
Okay.
But you're
standard
right,
range, short range plus, whatever.
It's true.
Anyhow, don't hold us to these exact numbers, but anywhere between 380 kilometers and I think close to or slightly over 600 kilometers on a Model S, long
which is
range.
the longest range Tesla that they make.
Yeah.
And you owned that.
I had P85D back in the day, though. You were only going to get low 400 kilometers of range. But the most...
But your new Model X is coming soon.
It's rated, if you look on the website, 528.
And that's the longest they have so far.
Yes, but that's... My last Model X was only about 440 at 100% state of charge. But let's make sure we qualify, and I say this or quantify, I say this to people right up front, but it all depends on how you drive.
Yes.
And it all depends on the outside temperature. And I like to make sure that we talk about that. The things I'm going to tell you, frankly, are very similar on a gasoline car, but gasoline cars have bigger gas tanks and they have longer range, so people don't really think about it.
Right.
So as you well know, the last number of months, you can get up to, depending on the temperature, 50% less range in your car.
Hardcore.
So you've got to watch all your meters and whatnot, and the faster you drive, if you're going to do $1.25 or $1.40 on the 407 or the 401 on a really cold day, you're not going to get the range.
Yeah.
But there's screens you can use to make sure you're paying attention properly.
Here's my experience. I started in October. We had a really great late summer. It was warm all the way up to like end of November. Like we had a great winter. So far, we still have had a great winter. So I did get that range anxiety. I knew that I was getting the standard range plus. He warned me, and everybody says this. If you ask everybody who owns a Tesla, just get the upgraded model. I just couldn't afford it. I couldn't justify it. But here's what happened. So I get home, and my work has free chargers that are not working yet, and they haven't been working since I started. And I've been like pressuring them to get it working.
Yeah,
so
lovely.
I drive an hour and a half, which is about 88 kilometers in the morning to work. Okay. So when I started, I left my battery meter on kilometers, not percentage. And I've since changed. Obviously, I think everybody should go to the percentage mode. It's way easier on your nerves. But I was finding when I got to work, I had about 75%, which is crazy, or 70% on a best day. So I was using about 20% to get 88 kilometers. Now, minus 16 day with the coldest day we've had so far since I've had the Tesla, I got to work with 52%. So you're looking at 30% less range. And it's just something you get used to. But the beautiful thing about this car is that, especially when my charger is working at work and at home, I get into my car every day, it's full.
Right.
I leave work, it's full.
I say to an ICE car driver, internal combustion engine driver, is your car full of gas every morning when you go to work? And it's not. But, the key is, too, there's all these little things that we make sure. So whether you're talking to a new owner, and unfortunately, the way some of the Tesla deliveries have been going, people may not be getting enough time spent with them on how the car operates. So sometimes we have to educate new owners, and you see some of these questions on the forums and on Facebook. Preheat the car before you leave, whether it's in the summer to cool it down, but most importantly, in the winter. It's plugged in at home.
Get that battery
use
warm.
the so-called shore power.
But why is a warm battery better?
Because actually the batteries are optimized at room temperature, if you will. Right. So on a really hot day, it circulates coolant and brings the temperature down. On a really cold day, actually it's different on an S and an X versus a 3. The 3 uses the motors to help heat the battery, but the S and the X have actual coolant lines that go through the batteries. And I'm not going to profess to be an expert in that. But, go to your phone app. We're one of the first manufacturers with a really robust phone app, and it gets better and better and better. Start the car up. Turn the climate on. It'll automatically warm the battery up because the climate's on. You can even, if you want, precondition the car through your screen and have it start charging at a certain time of day and be ready. That's not totally perfect yet, but it's getting there.
But so you can use off-peak power. You never have to use on-peak power.
And then when you leave, you won't have those, which is a whole other topic. We could be on this forever, but you won't have all the dots on your screen with very little regen.
Yeah.
So when the car is really cold, you're not going to get full regen braking, which is where it puts power back into the battery from when you decelerate. And also depends on how fast you drive and how you drive. And so the other thing to remember, most people don't pay attention to this, but let's say you jump in your car and it's a weekend.
Yep.
And you go 5 kilometers over to Canadian Tire. Then you go another 10 kilometers to Tim's. And then you go 10 kilometers to Costco. That's just like a gas car. That's really hard on the car. It doesn't ever warm up. So you're going to use more power in those little short drives. But then if you jumped in the car and went for an hour drive down to Niagara, it'll eventually start to level out. And you don't really want to even pay attention, even though you're right. The percentage meter is the best one to use rather than kilometers. Use in their little tray along the bottom, you can push and to see some of the extra features of the car, and you go to the energy meter.
Yep.
And you can pick 10, 25, 50 kilometers, and it'll show you your average usage per based on those kilometers. And I always have mine on 50. And that's going to give you a much more accurate, because it's actually tracking what you're doing, the temperature outside, how much you're using.
That speed, it'll show you that you spiked it. You're going up a big hill.
Absolutely. You'll see the regen and whatnot. So that's the thing to use.
Maybe instead of answering all the questions we get, maybe just every podcast we're going to answer a standard question, because we can continue on with the battery thing. I really enjoy this because, again, you're right. When I picked up my Tesla, I already knew most about it, but I got a 1 minute, here's your car, bye. And it's probably because he knew that I knew my stuff.
And the time of year, you might have had a little bit less range and not much regen in October, possibly. But the people that got their car, lots of people got their car in, spring right through the summer, and it's got full regen and full range most of the time. But first time they get in the winter and they go, oh my God, what's going on? Another thing, which we don't have time to get into today, but is the state of your charge and how cold your car is to supercharge it.
Yeah.
I get people complaining a lot. I pulled into the supercharger, I got hardly any charge left and it won't charge. It's because they probably just drove from home for 3 kilometers and the battery's really, really dead cold, and it's going to take a while to warm up the car before the battery can take the charge correctly.
Pro tip. If you put your map on and you select the supercharger as your destination, it preconditions your battery.
And that's fairly new with Tesla, just the last 6 months or so.
Oh, okay, cool.
And a lot of people don't even know that. So always, even if you know where the supercharger is,
put it in.
Put it in, and then the car knows it's going to a supercharger, and it preconditions so it gets ready, whether it's cooling it or warming it, getting it ready to accept the maximum charge.
One of the other questions a lot of times is how much can you actually save, right? How much can you save? I actually talked to my wife. It's been about October, November, December, January, 4 months I've had my Tesla. And I asked my wife, how is our hydro bill? She's not seen a difference at all. And maybe part of that is because I'm more conscious and all the lights are getting turned off, the fans are getting turned off. My kids when I leave in the morning, dude, every light in my house is on. It's like I can hear the electricity burning a hole in my wallet. So I've taken, I don't know if it just made me a little more conscious of it, but ours has not changed at all. And I charge it, it's always, if it's at home, it's plugged in the garage. At
so
10
you
degrees,
don't go
always.
On the metering at night to save money?
Don't do it.
I don't either. I should.
I don't.
I will tell you, some people have got exact scientific information on what their car costs because they put a special adapter at home on their meter or whatever. Mm-hmm. But my unscientific test was when I first got my car, I looked at my hydro bill a year prior into my hydro bill the first month I owned my car, and it was maybe $50 or $70 more for 2 months.
Yeah.
So it's really not a lot. You will do more in the winter because you're preconditioning your car. The car will turn on periodically and keep the batteries at a slight state of warmth. But, if you're spending $250, $350, let's be frank, there's pickup truck drivers and V8 car drivers that are spending $500 and $600 a month on gas.
Oh, easily.
If you can spend, $250, $350, $400, $500 a month in gasoline, and you're only spending $50 to $100 per month in electricity for home. And some people, depending on which Tesla you have, you may have some supercharging costs. But I've got some people that have kept really good track, and people that have compared to their previous vehicle for a year of driving a gas car, and it's substantially less. So even though you may be stepping up and paying more in a monthly payment, let's face it, most people, it's all about monthly payment.
Yep.
And if you're going to save less because you're not going to spend the money on energy and on gas, many times it's almost a break even. And then you take into the fact of, or less, you're not have very little maintenance and very little repairs, and overall it can be to your advantage.
Well, here, I'll give you an example. So before I bought my Tesla, I was at the same position in Oakville where I work. And so I was driving I have a Ford C-Max hybrid, and I love that car too. I loved it. It was my first foray into EVs, sort of, right? It wasn't a plug-in hybrid, just a normal hybrid, and it gets about 6.5 per 100 liters of its life. And I've been driving it for 5-6 years. And so I was driving to work to Oakville and back and spending over $250 a month in gas. Okay. And I'm not a heavy footer, about 120 in the highway, which some people could be a little heavy.
Yeah.
And the car gets 6.5 per 100. So $250 a month, I offset that now. I don't pay that fuel cost at all. I also don't pay the upkeep on the $60, $70 oil changes I get every 5,000 kilometers.
Yep.
I did some dirty math, and the yearly savings for me was upwards of $3,700, which if you look overall, it's not, obviously my payments are way over that. But here's the thing. I also get a beautiful car that's amazingly incredible at everything. The tech is it's
new updates all the time.
The lowest model is teched out, over-the-air updates. There's just things
new features, you don't even expect them.
Exactly. And it's like, it's built into that thing. And if I want to unlock them, I can pay for that stuff. But again, I am the poor man's Tesla owner, and I'm happy to be so, and because I'm very content. But as I get older and start making a little bit more money, I will probably get the more luxurious vehicles when they come out, like the Cybertruck or the Model X or
Model Y
or the Model Y when it comes out. And I will never not buy a Tesla now. Anytime I need a new vehicle at this point, I have a stupid Caravan. I hate that thing with all my heart. My kids love it because it has DVD players in it, and it's got a heated steering wheel. It's got all the bells and whistles because I have 4 kids. When we travel, we have to be comfortable. Yeah. And I can't afford a Tesla Model X because they're what, 120,000, 130,000. And so that's next though, right? So as soon as you step into a Tesla, you're not driving anything else.
Absolutely. And that's what we always say. If you're a skeptic in any way, shape, or form, just stop talking. Let's go for a ride.
Yeah.
Drive in it, sit in it, whatever. And most people are just blown away. Yeah. Listen, while we're talking about affordability, and I'm going to bring this up because you asked me to, let's talk about ways to pay for your car.
So if you take anything from this segment, and I just kind of got a light bulb and aha moment myself, is preconditioning your car before you leave home.
Absolutely.
And make sure that if you're going to a Tesla supercharger, that you put it into the navigation, because your car will precondition itself before you get there, and you'll have a lot of charging. I do that in Cambridge. I got 719 kilometers per hour charging over there. It was amazing.
And the V3s are way over 1,000, some of them. The other thing, which just to touch on what we're sort of on charging, plug your car in every time you can.
Always plug it in.
People say, oh, should I plug my car in and should I charge it to 80, 90%? Why wouldn't you? If you let your car for some reason go down to 50 or 40 or 30% because you don't drive hardly at all, and then you charge it back up to 90, it's not going to cost you any different than if you plug it in every night and charge it up just 20%, whatever you need. And I learned this because it's a safety factor. You don't know when you go home. All of a sudden, the last minute, your wife says, we got a call. Our buddies want us to go see them out in Pickering.
Yep. And
you left your car at 40%. And you think, oh my God, what am I going to do now? It doesn't hurt. Just plug it in, get in the habit. And I got to tell you, I've probably plugged my car in 99.9% of the time. And the only time I forget is when I get out of the car and I've got stuff in the trunk or whatever, and I go to get that out, and then I forget to go back out and plug the car in. Because other than that, it's been a habit. And when you walk out in the morning, you go, why have I only got 50%? What happened? So just plug it in every night, and 90% sort of is the optimum is what I...
First pro tip is BP. Always be plugging.
Yep. Yeah, well, we got talking, and when we were talking about this podcast sort of overall, I don't know how it came up, but you were talking about how you bought the poor man's Tesla. You don't need to dwell on that, by the way, buddy. There's lots of people driving those.
I actually kind of think it's like my thing.
You know, I asked you how you paid for it. You said, I financed it. You know, sometimes it's a bit of a touchy subject, but how can you pay for your car? You can truly finance it through Tesla or your bank. You can pay cash out of your own bank account or investments. You can pay cash, which people say is cash, but it's not really. That's on their line of credit, or you can lease it. And you told me you financed it, and I guessed over 8 years, right, Josh?
Yeah, it was 8 years.
Okay. 8 friggin' years. Or maybe it was 7. I don't know, whatever it is. I think you said it was 8.
Yep.
And I would suggest that 7 to 8 years is the average finance term for most Teslas on the road who aren't paying real cash. Mm-hmm. And that concerns me. And just as a sort of transparent comment, I'm actually in the auto industry. And I work primarily with ICE dealers. I'm not afraid to say that.
It's funny that you were. That's crazy because you're an EV guy, but you work specifically with ICE
because
dealers.
Frankly, that's been my whole career.
And that's
so we're a marketing agency, and that's it. We work with them on different types of things, and we'll go into that down the road. But more and more of them are going to be selling EV vehicles, and we can probably work with them on that. But long-term financing is the bane of the car industry. People take a short, so they want the lowest payment, and they take a long-term so they can get that low payment. And a lot of them think, well, this is going to be my last car. It's a Tesla. It's awesome. And Maybe more people will keep their Teslas longer than they've kept their gasoline car. But here's what happens. And I know this has happened to many of you out there. You take the car, no matter what it is, down the road a couple years later, you get married. You have kids. Your wife has twins. You thought you were only going to have one baby. You get a new job. You get transferred. You get bored with the car.
Yeah.
New tech comes out on the Tesla and you want a new one.
Yep.
And the problem is, it's what we call being upside down or a negative equity. The longer you finance your car, and when you try to get out of it early, usually you end up owing more to the bank or to Tesla, whoever it is, or to yourself if it's on your line of credit, than what it's worth. And then you can't get out of it.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in leasing. And I'm not
which to be honest with you, I was like,
you were skeptical about
because I did it before. I got burned. So many people have been burned.
Right.
And since our conversation, they've actually researched it, and there's still people who are like, do not lease a Tesla.
But here's the reason why people say that. There's two answers, whether it's a Tesla or not. Number one, they either have been brought up that way. Don't lease because you don't own.
Yeah.
And what did I say to you? Well, miss a couple of payments, you find out pretty quick who owns your car if you finance it,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
It's this stigma that I'm leasing it so I don't own it. Well, finance it, you don't really own it either. And it's also they're concerned about too many conditions. Well, they restrict how many kilometers I can drive, and I can't bring it back all damaged. Well, my answer used to be, and frankly, if you haven't guessed it, I used to be a lease trainer and consultant and whatnot in the auto industry, is if you go to trade your car in, and it's all banged up and scratched and burn holes in the seat, you're going to get less at trade time. It's just a way for the leasing company to put some guidance of what's acceptable to bring the car back.
Can't you negotiate those things?
Sometimes you can a little bit,
okay.
But it depends if if the dealer's going to keep the car themselves or if they're going to send it back to the manufacturer. We could talk about this ad nauseum, and I don't want to bore you with it. But also, you've got to look at things like people are concerned about kilometers. Oh, well, I drive too many kilometers and there's all these kilometer restrictions. And there's different types of leases, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But if you and I, let's say we both took the exact same car and the exact same time, and you do 15,000 kilometers a year and I do 30,000 kilometers a year, and we're both paying the same monthly payment on a 7 or 8 year loan, right? Mm-hmm. And then when we go to trade our cars, no matter when it is, you're going to have half the kilometers on it than I am, right?
Yes.
But you're going to get way more at trade time than I will. So the higher kilometers I put on my car, it has cost me at the trade time, because the price minus the resale value is the true cost of a vehicle typically.
Yeah.
So people get all hung up on, well, I had a kilometer restriction. Well, all it is a guideline again for the dealer or the manufacturer to say, what should we base the value of this car at the end of the term on how much driving you're going to do? So that's the thing. Now, the other thing about leasing is most people lease, frankly, for a lower payment. In most cases, there is a lower payment. Depends what term you take. And I said to you, and I actually did some math, you're going to be shocked here in a minute, that you could probably get a 4-year lease very close to what you would have paid for an 8-year finance. And I've proven that to myself over and over again. Like, I can't remember the last time I financed a car.
But how many kilometers do you get with that lease?
Well, it's a little bit complicated, and I hope we're not going to lose too many people here.
But this is the question. This is how you would sway somebody. This is the one thing they're going to ask. Yeah. So right. I get a new car after 4 years, but how many kilometers?
Here's what it boils down to.
Okay.
Through Tesla, you can lease an X or an S. Mm-hmm. You cannot lease a 3 yet. I don't know why, but I found a way to lease 3s. So some of you may know that I leased a 3 for a while, and many people were referred to me, who I referred to my leasing company, to lease a 3. The only so-called downside is they were what's called a finance lease. So you were responsible for the resale value. Frankly, the same you would be as if you'd financed it. So most leases, a Tesla lease, Audi, GM, Ford, whoever, you drive the vehicle, you take a term, 48 months, let's say, you get 25,000 kilometers per year. You've got to bring it back in what's considered normal condition for a 4-year-old car. And as long as you're not over that 96,000 or 100,000 kilometers, you can just drop it off at the end and you walk away. But you do have written in an optional buyback if you want to do that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's good about that type of lease is, let's say you had a situation, heaven forbid, and you smacked your car up and there's $20,000 worth of damage. If you've financed your car regularly and then you go to trade it in, you have to reveal that damage.
Yes.
And you're going to get less at trade time. On a lease, as long as it's been repaired correctly by a reputable body shop, you can just turn the vehicle in and it's Tesla or the manufacturer's problem. Okay. So that's another advantage.
That's cool.
The problem with the Model 3 is you can't lease it through Tesla. So the leasing companies that will lease, it's called a finance lease, as I said. So there's no kilometer restriction. That's one benefit, but you're responsible for the value at the end of the term. So if you take a $60,000 Model 3 that has a residual, I'm just making this up, that's $30,000 after 4 years, and you go to take it back in and they only can get $25,000 for it, in theory, you're on the hook for that $5,000 difference.
Yep.
But it'd be the same if you were on a 8-year loan and you went in after 4 years and tried to get out of it, there's a good chance you'd be on the hook for some negative equity.
Or more.
The advantage of the lease, though, even if it's this open-end or finance lease, is shorter term most cases, because lots of things change in people's lives, like I illustrated. You stay under warranty longer. You might be out of warranty for a little bit, but you're not going to be out of warranty for 4 or 5 years. Minimal repairs and maintenance, regardless of the maker or manufacturer. We know Tesla's not very many. And the other thing that I remind myself of is your down payment goes a lot further. So listen to this scenario. This happens, and I used to see this in my training world. People would trade their car in. I'm going to go buy a $30,000 or $40,000 vehicle, and I got a car that's worth 10 grand, and I'm going to trade it in. So I'm going to get 10 grand off my 40, let's say. So I'm going to finance 30, and quite often they start asking for a payment with no down or no trade, and there's their monthly payment. I can't afford 4-year or 5-year or 6-year. You better give me a 7 or 8 year payment. And frankly, the manufacturer, the dealer feeds that to the customers because they're afraid. They want to give a low payment.
That too. Doesn't it make more money off a longer term?
No, they don't.
They don't.
No, because what happens is the manufacturer's retail arm or finance arm is the one that actually leases it or finances it. The dealer can make a little bit of money through finance, but not on a lease program. So basically what it boils down to is if you had a $10,000 trade and you put it on a 4-year lease, you're going to get a way lower monthly payment than if you put that $10,000 trade towards a 7 or 8 year finance. 4-year lease or 4-year finance regardless, but people couldn't afford the finance payment. It's just mathematics. $5,000, $1,000, $10,000, whatever your down payment is, it goes further to reduce your monthly payment on a shorter term than it does in a longer term.
Okay, explain it like I'm 5. Let's see if I got this right. So I'm going to go to a private leasing firm, and I want to get a Model Y when it comes out. Let's say that, right? It's a $65,000 car. And I could go to Tesla right now, order it, and it's going to be $755 a month. Okay,
to finance it?
Yeah,
for 8 years, exactly.
Yes. Okay, if I go to a private place, like this guy you're talking about, and I get it 4 years, what would, and you're saying you can get around the same price for 4 years?
Here's an example, and I had some numbers.
Okay,
you
good.
may not know
Show
this.
me the numbers.
So I did Model 3 SR Plus, whatever we call that, short range, or what did you call it?
Standard range,
whatever. With no autopilot, but metallic paint, etc. And we put it on a 8-year loan at 4%. Tesla might be a bit more, your bank might be a bit less, but just for the sake of talking, roughly $800 a month. If you put that on a 48-month lease, it's $885.
So it's $85 more.
$85 more.
But
that's with $2,500 down. So adjust your down a little bit, put another $1,000 down, it'll probably be a bit less.
Okay.
If you did a 7-year term, you'd be $895 a month, so almost the same. And if you did a 6-year term, it's $1,024. So why wouldn't you take 4 years for $885 and you get a more comfortable monthly
so this
payment.
makes sense to me. But then in the end, how many kilometers do you get through? You said through a private guy, you don't have to have a kilometer restriction.
Well,
that's
most cases they won't give it to you. They won't put a kilometer restriction on because you're going to guarantee the value. So this case, again, it depends on the leasing company and how much driving. And I used to work for a leasing company. So I would say to you, Josh, how much driving do you do a day, per week, per year? And I should base my buyback, or what they call the residual, based on how you're going to use the vehicle, your vehicle, to be responsible and set the value on that. This case, I did use $30,000. That might be a little bit high. But if at the end of the term it's worth $30,000 and you want to drop it off, you walk away. But if it's worth more, if it's a responsible leasing company, they'll give you that profit towards your next car.
And then the beautiful thing about leasing too is after 4 years, you're just getting into another. You can continue that payment on the next. So it's the joy
of new. But let's be clear. Let's clarify. I know this is confusing. A closed-end lease, most manufacturer leases, S and X, you could walk away if it wasn't worth the value at the end. It's not Tesla's not your responsibility as long as you're not over kilometers.
Explain that like I'm 5.
Most leases through a manufacturer, including Tesla, they put a kilometer limit per year on it. And at the end of the term, you cannot be over those kilometers if you intend to drop the car off.
Right.
If you're going to buy it out, they don't care what condition it's in or how many kilometers on it. If you want to drop the car back to Tesla, if there's any abnormal damage, you have to pay for that. And if you're over the kilometers, so if you were allowed 100 and you did 130, then you're going to have to pay, I don't know what it is, it might be 15 cents a kilometer. But it's not really a penalty, because if you financed your car and you brought it back, you'd get less for your trade than someone who did, in my illustration I gave to you earlier, with normal kilometers. It's just the lease, they're going to pay that at the end. On a Model 3 only for now, because Tesla's not leasing them, you'd have to do a lease through an independent leasing company, and they will not put a kilometer restriction on it. They'll just put this dollar amount, let's say it's $30,000, and at the end of the term, They will appraise it, and you'll have to see how you stand. If you want to buy it out, fine for 30. If you want to give it back to them, it's only worth 27. Technically, you're on the hook for 3. If it's worth more, if they're an upfront leasing company, they'll give you that 3,000, especially if you get a new vehicle. I don't want to sound like a know-it-all.
Yeah.
But I've been leasing all my life. I've actually leased to people when I worked for leasing companies. I've been a leasing training consultant. I don't believe you should ever pay cash for a car. It's a horrible investment. If you've got true cash, I'm not a tax guy, but maximize your TFSA or your RSP or pay down your mortgage. If you don't have cash, in my mind, you're far better off leasing in most cases than if you finance it, because especially on a Tesla, you're going to have to take a ridiculously long term to be able to afford the monthly payment. And believe me, a lot of you that are already doing that right now are going to want to trade the car in down the road. A lot of you who are driving 3s are going to go, geez, I love that new Y. I want to get out of it. And you're going to blow your brains out because you're going to owe way more money than what you lease it. But if you were on a 4-year lease, the most you had was at the end of the 4-year lease. I don't want to sit here and say to you that leasing is cheaper than buying. I did some math, and if you bought this Model 3 that I did out after the end of 4 years and pay tax on the buyout and whatnot, it was very similar to owning the car and paying it out over 7 or 8 years.
Yep.
It might be a little bit more, but it's a matter of cash flow in your pocket. So you've got a lower payment maybe than if you'd finance it for a longer term or a similar term.
Yep.
And the other thing you can do when you lease many cases is you can get more car for the money. So if you had a budget in mind, and it's on a certain term, if you go lease for the same type of payment, you can maybe get a nicer vehicle.
Would you agree with this statement that most people who are wealthy don't buy cars with cash? Because a car always, for the most part, is a depreciating asset.
Well, that's what I've said to you. And I've rarely seen a case where somebody has a real reason why they shouldn't lease. One time I had somebody to say, we buy our trucks for cash because my company has so much money. At the end of the year, my accountant says, you got to get rid of some cash. You're going to pay too much tax. So they go and buy a bunch of trucks for 20, 30, 40, 50 grand. I really can't counteract that. But regardless, yes, people that know a lot about money will say, unless you're a multi-millionaire, and even then, there's other things you can do with your money, whether it's a stock market, whether it's a TFSA, whether it's paying down your mortgage, whether it's your RSP. Lots of people don't take advantage of that, but they're paying cash for a car. I knew we threw a lot of information out there. I know I talk pretty fast, but Josh, I don't talk as fast as you. And so some of you may be a bit confused. So again, we'll put some information on wherever we're going to post this, or I'll tell you at the end how you can email me, ask me some questions.
Yep.
And if you don't want to lease and you want to finance your car, or you still convinced you want to use your line of credit, fine. Just get a Tesla, and we're going to help you on that journey.
Yeah, and to add to that, is just get other opinions. Don't always think what you think you know is right, because you might be wrong. Even if you go to some people, go to multiple people. That's the beauty of shopping around.
Here's philosophy I take in my business life and personal life and everything. And I don't know whether you're too old for this or not, but do you remember Arsenio Hall used to have a show?
Yep.
And he had a segment at the start where he went, things that make you go, And that's what you want. If you're skeptical about EVs, we want people to go, after we give them reasons why. If you're skeptical about Tesla, if you're skeptical about leasing, if you're skeptical about climate change or being a vegan or whatever the heck it is, Let me plug the club a little bit again.
Yeah. Tell me about this club.
We, as I said, have just shy of 600 members, and we're starting to have some pretty cool things that we're doing. So we get together every month. We have guest speakers. I won't get into it heavily in detail here because we'll elaborate as time goes on. I don't want to give you guys watching and listening sort of an advance over our members, but we are going to have some people from Tesla coming out to speak to us in the next couple months. We just did an event where we...
Which people?
Which people?
Yeah.
I can't tell you.
You can't say?
I can't. I'm not going to tell you right now.
It's not going to be Debbie from accounting.
It's not going to be freaking Elon, but it's not going to be Debbie from accounting. Believe me, trust me. That's, I'm in the car business. You will want to listen to the people that are going to come out and talk to us.
When is that?
Probably March.
March.
That has to be 100% finalized, but we're very close.
But keep your eye on the Facebook and the emails from
if you're a member, getting the emails, etc.
Can people who are not part of the club come to these events?
Yes and no. So you can come to one of our meetings if you come as a guest of a member, but normally our social functions like the movie event that I mentioned and some of the other things, we open up and let other people be aware of it, whether you're an EV driver, Tesla enthusiast, or other people that might want to take advantage of it. One of the things we did recently was we did a screening of the movie Racing Extinction. And we heard about that movie when I was at a summit for worldwide Tesla owners down in California back in the fall. I'd heard a little bit about it before. And we were addressed down there, and I'd met this person before as well, by a gal by the name of Leilani Munter. And she's a vegan, ex-race car driver, activist, very heavily into ecology and whatnot. And she was involved in this movie. And it's all about how mankind is causing extinction to many, many species out there. And there's obviously a sort of a theme running through it about consumption, of meat and animals and climate change. Anyhow,
Let's get her on the podcast.
I can't promise that, but we'll see. She does lots of stuff like that, and
She'll do it.
she may be talked out. But anyhow,
I don't even know her. She'll do it.
So we had over 200 people come out to this movie. It was totally legit. We did it at a Cineplex. People come out on a Saturday morning. We screened the movie. I think it was very, very impactful. And Leilani was there for a Q&A, an intro and then a Q&A, which kudos to us for getting her. Coming up, as I said, we're going to have some great talks. We're hoping, again, no promises because we're having a meeting on the weekend to sort of do some planning going forward, but to do an Earth Day event, perhaps in conjunction with some other EV groups and whatnot around the GTA. And we have done, last year in the fall, we did a drive-in event. We had over 100 Teslas at a local drive-in. That was pretty cool.
That's really cool.
Imagine the drone shots of that.
That'd be awesome.
And especially on a Model X, nothing better than watching a drive-in through your big screen on the Model X and listening to the sound system. We've done winery events in the past, and we're hoping to do one of those again.
Yeah.
And that type of thing. So those are some cool things we're going to do on the social function side, and we do have these meetings every month.
What's coming up at this EV center coming up soon?
The next meeting is, we used to get together at Dave & Buster's, and we parted ways with them. And our next meeting, certainly for February anyhow, is going to be in conjunction with Plug and Drive at the EV Discovery Center, which is in North York, sort of near Yorkdale area.
That's cool.
And it's going to be held there, and the guest speaker is going to be Kara Clareman, who's the founder and the CEO of Plug and Drive. And that facility is pretty cool. They have most, probably not all yet, but most EVs available for people to look at and test drive, not affiliated with the manufacturers. So they allow the vehicles to be there, but you can get unbiased opinion, go for test drives, and we're going to be probably working with them.
Well, if I make it out,
more.
let's podcast from there.
Well, ideally,
I'll walk around and interview some people.
Absolutely.
So, okay, getting into the next, there's a couple things we want to do on every podcast.
Yep.
I think for sure. Tip of the week. I found this out this week. I posted on Facebook. I made a little video of it. This is cool. If you didn't know this, if you use Pin to Drive, which I think you should.
Yeah.
I know that they can't really steal it, but maybe they can. Pin to Drive is just a safer way to drive. Put your pin in and drive. If you don't have your pin, you can't drive. I think it's an awesome feature. I love it. One of my buddies owns Tesla. I was like, why do you use Pin to Drive? Like, he was judging me. I'm like, cuz I don't want someone to steal my stuff. And I was thinking the other day, I'm like, why is this pin over on this side? And then the next day, and I thought,
you're talking about the box where you enter your code and it moves around.
It moves
all
around
the
the screen.
Yeah.
Because if you're eating Cheetos or something and you get grease on your fingers, or it doesn't, you can't. These are just the time. This is why I love Elon and his design team.
Get back on track there, ADD boy. So basically what it boils down to is what Josh is saying. If you keep on putting your 4 pins in and it stayed in the exact same spot, your fingerprint would be almost burned into the screen, and some guy that got into your car could see the pin. So it moves around all the time. Each time you go in, it's in a different spot. Is that succinct?
That's exactly what I wanted to say, only with education. So that's the reason I said is the tip. It's not really a tip. It's just a feature that's really cool. The tip of the week is when you're in full self-drive or in autopilot, and when it tells you to tweak the wheel every 15 seconds or whatever it is now. So it's weird because it's not it's random intervals.
It's around 45 seconds on the highway anyhow.
Mine
it's a bit
could
less
be
than
earlier.
Stop and go. Yeah.
So it's different
Well,
depending on how
it knows
busy
you're
it is.
a noob. That's why.
Yeah, it's true. Instead of just tweaking the wheel, just turn your volume up, down one dot, and it turns it off. That's my tip of the week.
Anything on the wheel. So
anything.
If you turn the right-hand button on a Model 3, that changes the speed up and down, or the sideways changes the distance exactly. If the steering wheel gets an input, if you turn the volume up and down, and I think if you touch any turn signal stock, so if you were to change lanes or something like that, that. Absolutely.
So that's the Tesla tip of the week. It's just one of those simple ones. I love that little
And
feature.
I mean, you may be saying to yourselves out there, God, everybody knows that. Well, I think you're going to be surprised. There's a lot of new people who've taken Teslas over the last couple months or 6 months or a year that don't know that. I'm going to give you a totally random one. Doesn't apply on a Model 3, but a Model S and a Model X have what's called range mode. And especially on an X, actually. Range mode is, people think I keep my car in range mode all the time because I'm going to get way more range. It really doesn't. All it does is reduce the capacity of the heater or the air conditioner. And things like it turns off the ability to control the rear air conditioning in a Model X.
I've heard people complain that it wasn't working because they had range mode on and they didn't realize
exactly. This person said to me, John, there's something wrong. I can't get the rear air conditioning to work. Well, it's because they had range mode on. I didn't even know it. So there's lots of things. And again, what we're hoping to do is help people with that. And that's something that the club can do. We're available on Facebook, coming out to meetings, emailing me directly, and we can try to help you with any of these questions.
Yeah, and I'm going to do videos on all this. Even if they're all out there, I'm going to make it for our own people. Also, don't be an EV hole. I'll always say this to people. If you're going to a place to charge. We're getting too many Tesla owners out there sitting in these spots because they think they're allowed to sit there. Don't be an EV hole.
I don't want to trivialize that because it's all over the place. Whether it's an ICE vehicle parked in an EV spot, whether it's an electric vehicle or hybrid parked in an EV spot not plugged in, absolutely a concern. But a lot of it's education. We know sometimes people are doing it on purpose just to be dicks. But yeah, there's lots of things that we need to be aware of for etiquette.
There's etiquette. If you're an EV owner and you don't know that, so you're right. So maybe they don't know this. Just because you're an EV owner doesn't mean you're allowed to park there unless you're charging. Go ahead and charge.
What's interesting is I go to Leaf games fairly often, and when I go down to this parking garage, there's a whole bunch of chargers down there in the parking garage. And my family always says, Dad, park right there. It's right near the elevator. I don't need a charge. Like I have to drive through their head. Just because there's no one there right now and it's marked green, you don't know. Some poor guy's driving from some far distance away and he pulls in with 10% state of charge and you're plugged in. So even though we beat it to death, it is a concern. And another thing is, what really shocks me, and here's another plug for the club, is the a-holes that throw garbage on the ground at a supercharger or even at any charging spot. And there's no excuse for that. But we're trying to help that with, I don't know if you're aware of this, I think you might be, Josh. We were the first club, I believe, to put a garbage bin in at a supercharger. So we put a Tesla red with a little logo on it in at the Grimsby supercharger.
Oh, cool.
And we've got some good publicity behind that. And frankly, it's helped the club create awareness. But we didn't do it for the publicity. We did it to give back to the community. And we're hoping to do more of that this year. So we're talking to the Tesla supercharging team, trying to identify superchargers that don't have trash bins. And we have in our budget, the people complain sometimes, what do I pay my dues for? Or what do you do with the sponsor money? Well, we had to rent this movie theater when we did the event. We had to rent a tent in washrooms when we did a winery event. We subvent the meetings for the meals that we have. And if we're putting things like trash bins in, it costs money. So that's a whole other topic. Why doesn't Tesla put trash bins in? I think they didn't think of it. Because
empty them.
Well, exactly. And they didn't think of it from day one. And now there's thousands of them literally. So we have to get approval from the landlord. It makes us look
bad when you litter.
Yep. And the landlord has to approve the bin and they have to agree to empty it. But that's another thing we're working on.
Get into the etiquette, start learning the etiquette. Like this type of car, you're in this exclusive club almost. Even if you don't want to be, you're part of because we're not rare, but we're close to rare, right? It's weird. I saw 4 or 5 Tesla every time. As soon as I got into a Tesla, everybody has a Tesla now.
Well, that's what happens. You're much more aware. The last thing I want to stress, I don't know if you got anything more to cover here, Josh, but I'm not here to plug my referral code. You might eventually, but this is not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to make money from this. I'm not here to push my code or whatever. I'm not here to get a kickback from products that we end up endorsing. Josh may, he's in a sort of a different vein, if you will, but especially I have a responsibility as head of the owners club that I have to be very arbitrary. Yeah, and
you're being very and John's being very, very forthcoming with what he wants to do. We talked about this even before we did this. Yeah, he's to be honest, John has like really, really expensive headphones over there. He doesn't need it. I'm not saying I do need it, but
I'm also old enough to be your dad, buddy.
Exactly. Well, before we wrap up here, John, where can they find the Tesla Owners Club online?
Well, we're on Facebook and Instagram as Tesla Owners Ontario and on Twitter at Tesla Owners ONT. We'll be sending, of course, the podcast by email to all our members. And our website is ontario.teslaownersclub.ca.
This has been our inaugural pilot episode. We hope you enjoyed it. We again, we hope you didn't drag on, but I think there was some really great stuff here that I even learned, which is the beautiful thing about what we're doing here. I don't know everything. I know a little bit. I know the tech side very well because I do a lot of research, but you come from the tech and you come from a world of more wisdom than I. You are my elder and you got lots of wisdom to gain from this. So I'm excited about this.
Okay, son.
We'll see you next time on the Tesla Owners Club Ontario podcast.
Bye, everybody.